Good morning, thank you, and special thanks to Linux Polska for hosting this event again and having us here. I was here 3 years ago. We weren't in this building, we were in a government building, I think in the city center, and we didn't have nearly this many people. And at that time, while open source, the interest in open source in Poland was high, there was questions about the role of Postgres and database in deployments in government and enterprise. And in those 3 years that have passed, we've made extraordinary progress to the point now where the database market is undergoing a fundamental change, much like we saw happen when I was at Red Hat with the Linux market. Also we saw, and we continue to see, in the middleware with JBoss. So we are now seeing, 3 years later, a full transformation of the database market on a global basis. And that's happening here in Poland as well as many countries around the world. Now, I'm from, in the United States, I'm from Boston. In Boston, sometimes we talk very fast. So for my colleagues here in the audience, I'll do my very best to talk slowly. So I do believe that what's happening in the database market is very similar to what happened in the Linux market. Now, I was at Red Hat in late 2001, early 2002, before Linux was very popular, at the time when companies and organizations were just starting to think about changing away from Unix, changing away from Microsoft to new open source technology. And open source was very unfamiliar to people back in 2002. And as you all know, in your experience with using Red Hat in Linux and JBoss, you've experienced the value and the benefit of bringing open source into your environment. And we're just starting to see some of the same phenomenon that created the extraordinary growth in operating system happen in database. But what makes it so powerful in the database market is the database market is $30 billion. Now, $30 billion US dollars database market. Oracle, the #1 competitor, has 50% market share. The second two companies, IBM, Microsoft, each split another 45%. So 3 companies have 95% market share. Very large market controlled by very few companies. But so many of the characteristics that applied to the Linux market around standardization and the need to lower costs apply in database market, but at an even greater degree. And so what we're seeing is we're at a transition point in the Postgres market, and we talk about it as a tipping point. And the idea of a tipping point is there's not one big bang event that's changing the market. In fact, as it was with our work at Red Hat, it's many small things that are adding together to create a big change. And I want to talk to you about the variety of small changes. In the past 3 years since I was here last, Postgres has been in the news and adopted by many large companies. Maybe you've seen some examples. You know Skype was purchased by Microsoft. Skype, how many of you use Skype? Yeah. Skype runs entirely on Postgres. And so in the days when people thought, can Postgres handle large-scale database? Today, 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, 3 terabytes, 4 terabytes. Postgres databases run in the petabytes, in fact. So Postgres database capabilities, begin to get exposed. Skype has been using Postgres for a long time. You see another example. Facebook acquired Instagram for over $1 billion. Yeah, everybody knows Instagram? Instagram uses Postgres as a database. And you start to hear stories of Salesforce.com interested in hiring Postgres database developers. Salesforce.com is one of Oracle's largest enterprise-class customers. The largest and most successful software as a service company in the world is exploring Postgres now. And our own growth and success is beginning to show at EnterpriseDB in the market. So why is this happening? So here's one of the small steps that make the big change. Big technologies and advancements in Postgres has been happening over the past, really 3 to 5 years. Simple things like the ability to scale across multiple core servers. If you look back 3 years ago, 12 to 16 cores was the upper limit of what Postgres could handle. Now we scale on a single server to 80 cores and above. That work was largely done in combination with EnterpriseDB, HP, as it relates to work on some of their servers and for their customer needs. You see things like streaming replication, synchronous replication, cascading replication. New technologies have been growing rapidly around performance, scalability, usability, manageability, and in our case, we continue to add features for Oracle compatibility, enabling Postgres to meet larger workload needs. A major element of one of the technologies we've added is around replication. So where companies need to take database, replicate from one database to another. In the past, that replication technology was limited. We've introduced a multi-master replication through part of our Postgres Plus advanced server technology, being used now by one of the world's largest insurance companies to manage multiple data centers that are distributed geographically around the world. Another example of technology improvement that makes Postgres more usable is the introduction of Postgres Enterprise Manager, an enterprise-class management, monitoring, and tuning technology for broad-scale Postgres deployments. 3 years ago, if you wanted to have a large-scale Postgres deployment, you used some various tools, some from the community that many of you may know, PGAdmin, an excellent technology. Much of what's available today in Postgres Enterprise Manager evolved from PGAdmin. But the ability to manage and monitor Postgres deployments enables you to grow your Postgres deployments. Added to that are tools to help with performance management and SQL queries. Again, basic technologies that you're familiar with Oracle, with IBM, with SQL Server, that may not have been available with Postgres in the past are now all available. That change has happened in the past 2 to 3 years. And because of that change, we've seen expanded customer growth. We now have over 2,000 customers. When I was here in 2010, we had under 1,000 customers globally. Now over 2,000 customers, and our growth rate is moving, our growth rate continues to accelerate on a bigger base of customers. And I think that speaks to the demand and interest in using Postgres as the new standard open source database in enterprise, and the use of Postgres as a replacement for existing expensive proprietary databases. You see some examples here of companies now, our customers, who use Postgres Plus from EnterpriseDB in production in their environments. And you see this, in the regions here. You also see large customer adoption in North America and Latin America. Today, over 40 of the Fortune 500 companies use Postgres Plus from EnterpriseDB in mission-critical and non-mission-critical production environments. So the question from 3 years ago, can Postgres scale? Can Postgres perform? Does Postgres have the features to meet the needs of my mission-critical workloads? That question no longer exists. We've seen time and again now with very important organizations from large commercial enterprise to government enterprise or government entities around the world adopting Postgres as a standard database and using it as leverage to lower total cost. So we talk about cost. This is an example. As many of you may know, Oracle, about a year and a half ago, dropped support for HP-UX Itanium servers. Yeah, everybody remember when this happened? Oracle acquired Sun. Oracle then had server hardware, and they decided they weren't going to support HP as a way to promote more Oracle server hardware sales. As a result of that, EnterpriseDB and HP worked closely together to create a Postgres build for HP servers. And as part of that, HP began to promote Postgres as a primary solution to market. So, remember what I said, a tipping point is the combination of many small things happening in combination to create a big outcome. So HP standardizes around Postgres. This ROI, or this TCO calculation, was created by HP for presentation and promotion to their customers. Yeah, this is not created by EnterpriseDB. And it shows the massive savings that a customer can achieve when moving from Oracle on HP to Postgres, EnterpriseDB Postgres Plus on HP. So the savings are shocking. And the savings are so big that companies and governments can no longer ignore exploring the technology. So how does this work? When you look in the open source stack, there's a lot of money to be saved with open source technologies. Many of you use this. How many of you use one element in the open source stack today? At least one. At least one. Yeah, I know many of you. Probably all of you. And depending on where the level of the stack that the piece of software exists in, the economic rewards get greater. We know that database is a hard market to transform because databases and applications tie together so intimately. Yeah? And this is what makes the database market so big. Yeah? Because you have applications, data is important to every company. Applications are so closely tied to database that changing is difficult. It's because of that that companies like Oracle can become so massive, because they have created the most effective lock-in that could be created in business. But what's changing now, the Postgres, as you know, Postgres is an ANSI SQL standard relational database. The skills required to run an Oracle database are the same skills that can be used in a Postgres database. Yeah? And so it's harder to change database than other parts of the stack, but the value in changing database technology is extraordinarily high. And we help with that at EnterpriseDB with some technologies for Oracle compatibility that make it easy to migrate applications. But the value as you move through the stack increases. And you're already enjoying much of that value in your work with JBoss and RHEL from Red Hat. And we're starting to see more and more of you who are using those technologies come to EnterpriseDB for Postgres, for early Postgres help and support. But the savings potential is extraordinary. So this is another small reason. Many strung together. Cloud, we know, is important. Platform shift. You know, as we saw in Red Hat, in the early days of Linux, if you remember, 2001, 2002 is a major platform shift. Platform shift from Unix to x86. Does everybody remember that platform shift? In the change, Linux was able to come into the platform decision-making process. We see a similar shift in the way platforms are migrating to utility computing. So think of cloud as utility computing. We created a product, Postgres Plus Cloud Database, which enables you to run an exact same version of Postgres, community version Postgres, or Postgres Plus from EnterpriseDB. You can run that in a fully automated, elastic cloud environment. Forrester did research on this category. We were named in one of the leadership categories. We're very proud of that. It's technology that allows you to run Postgres, you know, in a way that can scale automatically. And so you need very little database expertise. It's designed for application developers, and it allows you to automatically set parameters for when the database gets larger in terms of servers, or when you need more concurrent connections, how the database scales, database memory, and database size. So we've seen more and more companies, as they explore Postgres, at least initially like to explore it, perhaps in a private cloud setting or in a public cloud setting, and now look to technologies like Postgres Plus Cloud Database as a way to do that. And again, many small things that create a big change. I think another reason the market for Postgres is changing database is the ecosystem around Postgres is growing very fast. EnterpriseDB offers a complete product and service solution to help companies and organizations deploy Postgres. So not only do we take the core Postgres, we enhance it for manageability, scalability, performance. give that to our customers as a Postgres Plus product line, and then enhance it further with the cloud offering. Around that, we offer, as you know, full support, services, and training. And it's because there's a full ecosystem of support that enables organizations to begin to use Postgres like they use any other software technology. So it's not just relying on an open source community. Postgres open source community is an extraordinarily competent open source community with great technology, and I encourage you to try the free version of Postgres. I think you'll find it to be an excellent technology out of the box. But companies like EnterpriseDB are here to help, and there's an ecosystem that goes beyond us of other software providers, service providers who enable you to use Postgres effectively. And you can begin to see how we map that to your needs over time. And as we look at our customer base, we find that companies engage the use of Postgres at very different points in time in their life cycle of deployment in their infrastructure. You can see investigation, you're thinking about Postgres, validation when you're trialing and testing the technology to make sure it can meet your needs. Once you've accepted the technology, moving into migration and development, and then, of course, into production. And so we've built an ecosystem of support, tools, consulting, and other technologies to help you explore Postgres, try Postgres, and deploy Postgres successfully at every step along the way. A lot of that work we do in combination with our partner, Red Hat, because most of the times you're making a decision on database, you're also making decisions about operating system and middleware. So we work very closely with Red Hat as part of this process to help in your deployment of the technology so that you can achieve maximum ROI in the least amount of time. Just quickly on the company, if you didn't know, we're a global company, over 130 employees worldwide, 2,000 customers. We enjoy extraordinary amount of downloads in Postgres. Companies and organizations from around the world come get Postgres from EnterpriseDB. And we're one of the largest, we are the largest Postgres products company in the world. In fact, there really is not another company that's our equal. We have a host of financial backers, from large strategic investors, certainly to financial investors. So as you think about the tipping point for Postgres, remember what I said. You know, there's no one big event that changes a market as big and as powerful as the database market. It's a series of small things that add together to create a big change. And you see that. That has to happen in the context of an industry leader. We're very, very proud at EnterpriseDB to be the leader in bringing Postgres solutions to customers around the world, certainly bringing more and more to companies here in Poland. I will be here through the day, and I welcome the opportunity to meet and get to talk to you. We have a space outside, so if you have any questions about EnterpriseDB, any questions about Postgres, any questions about companies we've worked with, please feel free to stop by. I wish you the best for the rest of the day, and thank you for having me.